The following episode is sponsored by Worldpay. Worldpay supports over 400,000 businesses around the world in mobile, online, and in-store payments. It serves all types of businesses and is the trusted payments partner of some of the world's largest and well-known e-commerce companies. You may interact with Worldpay several times a day without realizing it. Learn more at worldpay.com.
Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hello, and welcome to episode 59 of Total Retail Talks. I'm Joe Keenan, Executive Editor of Total Retail. Today I'm joined by Ian Wisbey, Senior Business Development Manager at Worldpay Americas, a provider of secure payment services for small and large businesses, particularly retailers. We're going to be discussing Worldpay's new research report, Why Do They Pay That Way?, which examines how age, gender, and culture affect online buying behaviors. Thanks for joining me today, Ian.
Good morning, Joe. Good to meet you.
So my first question is, let's talk a little bit about that research report. It kind of focused in on how age, gender, and culture affect consumers' online shopping behaviors. So going into the survey, what were some of the hypotheses that you guys held about these different ways that consumers were shopping online?
Sure. Well, historically, I think we had pulled reports which were just saying, here you go, here's the country, here's a whole list of payments. But what we've done now is, as you said, the research is now called Pay That Way, and it's an extensive insight into, basically, which we've carried out this year into, global payments and payment mix by geography. We thought historically we were kind of missing something out, and that geography was driving the way that people choose to pay. So the primary research included a mix of emerging, mature, and established markets to test the hypothesis, focusing on age and gender and how they play a significant role in how people play. We don't believe that anyone in the market has had the answer to this, so we looked at the following research themes. Online shopping habits, how online shoppers of different ages, gender, and country prefer to pay with traditional or new devices. How do they pay? Testing the assumptions that shoppers of different ages prefer different payment types and why they pay this way. Looking at what the shopper's looking for to motivate them to pay, look for any differences by ages. So, with those 4 points, and that was our original grounding.
So I guess probably before we get into kind of some of the results, I guess it would probably be good to identify some of the methodology behind it. Do you know, how many countries that you focused on and sort of how many respondents to the survey or how many people were studied?
Yeah, we went out to 10 countries and 20,000 merchants in each country. So as you can imagine, simple mathematics says 200,000 merchants. We picked the large established markets such as, the US and various places in UK, Europe, etc. But we also looked at some of the emerging markets. So obviously various places in Asia and Latin America as well. So
then let's kind of dive into what you guys found what the research revealed. I'm interested, did you come back and say, okay, our traditional, what we thought going in was proved to be correct, or were there some surprises as far as the data?
Obviously there were some facts coming from the payments business. You kind of think, some of those are pretty obvious, but actually we don't realize it. So, obviously the research did reveal some very interesting facts around shopping habits, in particular traditional methods versus obviously the new channels, which is effectively desktop versus mobile and tablet. Also, when we look at the battle of the sexes, as it were, women are much better at mobile payments and adoption than men. And also when it comes to mobile penetration, everybody thinks, initially maybe think that the US is leading that way, but actually mobile penetration is way higher in Asia than the rest of the world. And also age does make a difference in the way that people pay. We saw, this big break at the age of 50. The over 50s are being very credit card driven, whilst the younger age, such as the under 50s, look for alternative payment types. So those were, some of those are pretty obvious, but it was obviously confirmed with that data.
Yeah. So let's continue on that mobile theme that you kind of just mentioned a little bit. So obviously mobile is gaining traction not just here in the U.S., but as you mentioned, even more so in other parts of the world. So can you talk a little bit about how mobile shopper behavior is evolving? Like I said, here domestically, but also globally.
Sure. There's this. You keep reading about mobile, and the huge perception that it's taking over the world. And when you look at it, it's still not that way, and it's still far from true. So, obviously, the research told us that mobile hasn't taken over all transactions, and there's still a long way for mobile to go to actually get the majority. Whilst, most people know that, most people surf on their mobiles, but when it comes to actually purchasing, 80% are still paying via a desktop. So, mobile is still sitting at maybe 20% globally. Yeah, so, as I said earlier, the US isn't leading the way, and Asia has 53% of payments are via a mobile device. So, our recommendation is therefore, if you're looking for a mobile launch, then you should be looking to Asia or the Asia Pac region for your best true reflection of mobile payments.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think what you said there kind of confirmed what I believe, that here, at least here in the United States, that mobile is still really, for shoppers a research tool. They kind of do their research and they do their browsing on the mobile, but then they're more likely to end up on a desktop to make the purchase. So, kind of confirmed what I suspected at least. So let's kind of then get into a little bit about the different ways that around payments, and what were some of the key findings that emerged around payments as far as age, gender, some of the research findings you found around the payment space.
Okay, well, as I said earlier, we see that payment behavior does change by age. Looking at the baby boomers, a massive 50% of them purchase by credit card, and obviously this varies by country, with Japan leading the way. A massive 93% of the over 50s purchase using a credit card, with the USA at 64%. So obviously there's quite a percentage difference there. We also look at the under 50s. So you see the preference towards debit cards and alternative payment types. So by an alternative payment type, we look at non-card scheme payment types, being e-wallets, bank transfers, as an example. And then when you dig a little bit deeper into the under 50s, it's the millennials who are riding the wave of alternative payment method. So they are really pushing forward and using as many alternative payment methods like the e-wallets, the bank transfers, etc. So, that over 50 and under 50 is crucial if that's your market, and you need to obviously select the right payment types if going on to those age groups. If those age groups are your targets.
Yeah, and so I want to get into millennials, but a quick follow-up there on the alternative payment methods. Do you find, how does the U.S. Penetration on these alternative payments compare to some other areas of the world? And, we hear a lot about Apple Pay and some of the mobile wallet solutions. Where do we stand versus the rest of the world?
The US is still very, very card-driven, with the likes of PayPal being an e-wallet. So, alternative payment penetration in the US is quite low. But if you look at Asia, is the largest penetration when it comes to alternative payment types, and Europe following close behind. So, if you're looking to go into those markets and you're just using card types, then you are really restricting your growth, and you should be looking at variable payment types. I mean, I can pick some countries in particular, but China, Germany, Netherlands, etc. If you go in there with Visa and MasterCard, you're going to be like 10% of the market.
Yeah, really, really good point. So then I mentioned millennials. Let's get into that a little bit and some of the research you have around that segment. So what were some of the findings specifically around how millennials are shopping online? And then kind of a second part to that question is, do you have any thoughts on how retailers can better serve this demographic, and specifically payments or otherwise?
Sure, and as I said earlier, that the millennials really want to use the alternative payment types as opposed to the credit cards, and they also know exactly what payment types they want. And then the negative thing is, if they don't find it, they will effectively abandon the cart. It's an excuse for them not to pay, and they'll go to a competitor. So, a massive 45% will go to a competitor if they don't see the payment method of choice, and if they're forced down another payment type that they don't like. Obviously, looking at the payment motivation, the top three given on average on all age groups, and not necessarily millennials, was availability, convenience, and speed. So if you look into the different markets on the next level down, we do see motivation split by 22% of millennials want payment methods that offer them more control over their finances. And if you target millennials, you should be getting to know the alternative payment market, uptake on the market level, and give them more options to pay. We have merchants that offer potentially up to 60 to 70 payment types to make sure, because millennials are their target, as they prefer to have payment types that gain greater control over their finances.
Yep. And then my final question, Ian, is let's look ahead and what are some of the payment trends that you're tracking that you believe retailers need to be aware of for 2017, and kind of you could take that in two parts. One, both here in the U.S., but also as retailers look to expand internationally, what are some of the things you gave good examples around the alternative payment methods? What are some of the things that retailers need to be aware of as they look to grow their businesses internationally?
Sure. I mean, Worldpay believes that we see the millennials are self-imposed squeeze on their spending. So there's a drive and adoption of prepaid cards, particularly in those emerging and semi-mature markets. The appetite for e-commerce is still very high among shoppers in these regions, but access to credit cards has basically been the hurdle for them to do that. So also this is a huge impact in the lower economic brackets, being LATAM and Asia. Prepaid cards do come with a predefined spending limit, which obviously helps them control their finances, and therefore accessibility to a much larger percentage of the population. They also ensure that the individual customer doesn't fall into debt by living beyond their means. It all comes down to controlling their finances. As an example, in Brazil, for example, there's a payment type called Carta Elo, which has had a huge widespread adoption, and it's now challenging Amex as the third most popular payment type behind Visa and MasterCard. And in July this year, the first Carta Elo payment was transacted out of the US over the Discover network. So, there's this thing about you've got to choose the right payment type on a geography basis. Otherwise, you're not going to get any traction. Your ROI is not going to be maximized or optimized. So obviously, we're talking about prepaid, anything that helps people control their finances.
Great. Well, I want to thank Ian Wisbey of WorldPay Americas for his time telling us a little bit about the company's new research report. Why do they pay that way? And just a quick note to all our listeners that Ian will be speaking on a webinar that Total Retail is hosting this coming Wednesday on this topic. So we've kind of just scratched the surface here with some of the data and insights that we have on this topic around payments and sort of international expansion. So please check out Total Retail's website for more information. You can register for the free webinar, which again is happening this Wednesday at 2 o'clock. So go to mytotalretail.com for some info on the webinar. So with that, I want to thank again Ian Wisbey of WorldPay for his time. Please check out our podcast channel page, mytotalretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on iTunes and Stitcher, but make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. Lastly, please follow us on Twitter at mytotalretail or on Facebook at facebook.com/mytotalretail. Thanks, and I look forward to you joining us on the next episode of Total Retail Talks. This episode has been sponsored by Worldpay. Want to know more about the Why They Pay That Way consumer research study? Visit paythatway.worldpay.com.